Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being the show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Lawman, Reeves, Season 1, Episode 6. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we immediately pick up where the last episode left off, and we have Reeves and Pierce facing off again after 12 years. It's been, and I kind of brought it up last episode. It was just like, right, this man, especially because he was just having visions of Curtis, it just seemed like it was all foreshadowing what was to come. And it's like, right, you're face to face with him, and Bass is keeping his cool, even though it's like, yeah, this is the man, you know who this man is. Yeah, you fought alongside him, but he's also the man that like murdered Curtis. You know, Curtis was lowering the gun, and Pierce still shot him, knowing what he meant to you. So it's kind of this situation of, yeah, you could try and arrest me, but across the river, I don't know if it's like an authority thing he was kind of implying, or whether it was a black and white thing of, he's like, yeah, we got both of these badges. Yours is made out of tin. His is made of like a peso. But I guess it's a jurisdiction thing, but also maybe it could also be seen as a black and white thing of, yeah, you might be a U.S. deputy marshal, but the fact of the matter is once we cross over there, I have my authority and you don't have any, but you're also a black man, so your authority will be a little. It feels like it could be interpreted that way, but maybe it's just simply like, no, you don't have any authority there because the authority there is mine, so you can never hold me. He's like, and Bass is like, I never thought about even arresting you, because I think for him it's like he knew that wouldn't be the case. But he's also like, yeah, but I know you're probably thinking about killing me because I could see that hate in your eyes after everything that's kind of happened. So obviously Bass wants Jackson taken care of. Like, hey, like, don't make him walk all that way. It's like, oh, he won't. Even the whole thing about we got this wolf, we're going to return it to the wild. You can tell like it got Bass feeling a certain way. I'm like, the fact is you've got this while you're supposed to be picking up Jackson makes me go like, are you going to use that on him? I kept getting that inkling, and we'll get to it in a second, but there's a high probability they did. But either way, I think what bothers me the most is the nonchalantness of Pierce. Because it's kind of like, right, we're peers in a certain capacity. We're both U.S. Marshals, but it is just also that thing for Bass is like, you're a murderer. How did you get a badge? Which I'm sure that also flows into Bass a little bit. Because, I mean, Bass is going through it this episode. There's like so many beautiful metaphors and imagery to describe like that metaphor at the end of just like, right, the blood weighs you down. It's like the blood is so heavy in your hands you can't even hold your children or hold your wife. I mean, even Jenny's like, where's my husband? Where's that light in your eyes? It's like that light dims more and more every day when it's just because he's questioning so much in this episode, and that's also like probably what rubs him the wrong way. It's just like, you seem so calm and at ease. Because Pierce never said those lines at the end of the episode, but it's his brain playing it over and over. It's his own guilt. And maybe some of that was cut out, but I'm assuming it's just like Bass's manifestation of all that being like, this is what Pierce would say. You know, because they've never had too many conversations. They've only talked, like, this is the third time they've ever talked. Like, they talked back in the first episode. Then, what was that, the second episode with Curtis? I believe that was the second episode. Or was that still the first episode? I don't remember. No, I thought it was still the first episode. So they've only had like, this might be the third conversation that we're aware of. And like I said, maybe some of that conversation was cut out and he did say all that. But, and just for it to come at and like Bass's, like, not lowest point, maybe darkest point, but I think it's so, like I said, even me, it bothers me where it just seems like you seem so calm. You seem like you're trying to uphold the badge, but I don't believe you for a second when it comes to the whole Jackson thing. I was like, because he made a point to tell Bass like, okay, yeah, there are some people who deserve it, but do you know how he killed him? It's like the guy was blubbering and praying, went all the way from Texas to somewhere else. Wasn't Texas to Columbia, I think is what he said. Maybe it wasn't somewhere else, but he was like, took him there, like tied him to a tree, put the gun in his blubbering, praying mouth, and then pulled the trigger. I mean, to me, that doesn't seem as, but I guess the whole point, I was going to say, like, it didn't seem as brutal as you made it. You made it sound like he sliced and diced him or something, but I think it's more so about the fact is you made a man drown in fear. You left him. You wanted him to be so afraid and fearful, and you put him down like some wild, like you treated him worse than you would an animal. I think is what Pierce was kind of getting at. But I guess that was also the point, considering all that he had done. And Pierce is like, right, no man deserves to die like that. No matter what he's done, even a Yankee. But he was like, yeah, and you and I, he specifically said Yank, but he's like, yeah, you and I know better than anyone, considering how many we've killed being on the side that they were on. The Confederacy side of things. Bass was even saying that he's like, I'd be praying for you. And Jackson was like, yeah, don't bother the big man in the sky about that. Because I think for him, it's like, whether I go to heaven or not, that is on me. And Bitman's got other people to worry about. I kind of know where I'm headed. It feels like he knows. Regardless of my reasoning, I still ended up doing something like that. And whatever punishment God sees fit, that's what I deserve. I think that's his perspective on it, at least. Even though him and Bass both had that conversation, that back and forth about God and judgment and who's judging you last episode. But this weighs super heavy on Bass to the point after this encounter with Pierce, he went back to Sarah's place. I mean, to our knowledge, he hasn't seen Sarah in like 12 years because we had a 10-year time skip when he got back with Jenny and they built their family. Then it's been 2 more years on top of that. And it seems like the place was a little run down, and even Billy's like, yeah, the place doesn't smell right. And when Bass goes outside, he sees, like, I don't know if that's supposed to, because when they buried Curtis, it wasn't like, because it looks like there's a box there, so I don't know if she eventually built like a proper, like, kind of almost headstone of sort, because it looked like it was like a very specific box kind of design. And I'm like, I think they just buried him. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like implying that Sarah died, like say at some point during those 12 years, because Bass didn't check up on her, because I think he was getting back to Jenny and what the future could be, and maybe it popped in his mind from time to time, but like I said, I don't know if he popped in to check on Sarah at all, because it probably would have been too painful, both for him and her. He'll probably say like it was for her, but it was also for himself, of like he feels like he failed, got her son killed, and regardless of how he felt about Curtis might have been like his boy, his pup, but it's still like, no, that was your child, and here I am. I've gone off, had 5 of my own while you lost your only one. The only tie and connection you had holding on to in this world, only thing that tied you to your deceased husband. Like there's a lot there, so I could see that being the reason why Bass doesn't go and visit her. So they stop by the town so that Bass could be in a bar and drink, and he's looking for a scrap, and he kind of starts something with some other guy. The guy was just minding his own business, but then like Bass was looking for a fight, but the guy turns out to be a Texas Ranger, and he assumed like, oh, Pierce told you to follow me. He's like, nah, man, I just happened to be here when you wanted to scrap. He's like, who's Pierce? It's like a man from my past. And it just made Bass start questioning, what he does. Like, is he even right? Like, I'm sentencing men to death, whether it is a situation of whether I'm pulling a trigger, whether I'm just straight up sending them to their deaths. Yeah, they might have done bad things, but it's still that thing of I have a badge that allows me to be the judge and jury of whether or not people die. It still doesn't make that hurt any less, because Bass carries it. Every person he's ever killed, every drop of blood he spilled, because even Jenny said it an episode or 2 ago when she was talking to Edwin, that my husband will tell you any person he's killed is one too many, because Bass carries that all with him, and that is something that will erode your soul. Like, it is just, you have to do what's right. You're trying to do your best. That's all any person is trying to do. Yes, there are going to be piece of shit people who are just going to do stuff just to do stuff. I think Pierce falls in that category. We'll talk about that later. But at the end of the day, Bass is trying his best, and it's just that interesting conflict you have, which I think could still be felt present day. I can't speak on it, but there's got to be this complicated feeling, with how the black community feels about police officers or minorities in general, how when you see one of your own in, like, I don't have that preconceived notion of like, oh, you're a traitor or something, but there's got it for some people that, depending on the community you grow up in, that can be a thing. And I think Bass is feeling that a little of like, it's the lives he's taken, but also when it's like, oh, cuts even deeper when it's a black person. You like, every life in his mind is like every life is equal, but on a personal level, it's got to sting a little bit more knowing like, oh, you sentencing a man like Jackson to death. Now you know his story. Maybe it would have been easier not knowing his story. Who knows? Like he sentenced black men to death. Like some of the people, like we saw Ramsey again to this episode. You know, like that still doesn't make it easier. It's still just more blood added to the pile. Once again, might not be directly doing it, but you're still indirectly responsible for bringing these people to justice. Despite you know, it is your job. These people did wrong. You are bringing them to justice. It's your job. Doesn't make that any less of a heavy burden to bear. But at the end, you know, as we learned from Loki, if you've seen Loki, it's all about choosing your burden and what you can live with. You know, it's only way you can handle that is scar tissue, and let's just say Bass has definitely built up quite a lot of scar tissue in his life. But what I thought was so interesting, because he was starting to wonder like, oh, is there, you know, am I doing the right thing, is there even any God? And the guy, the ranger, interesting, his name's like Braxton, which is funny enough, like if I'd seen things in order, I would have seen the actor, his name's Brian, is it like Brian Von Holt? I would have seen him in this before I saw him in Quantum, this week's episode of Quantum Leap, which is also, you know, so funny, period piece situations. But either way, he was like, God is always present, and he sees the good that you do, but that doesn't make Bass feel any better. In fact, he later on gets into a scrap with Webb's people. Some of his people started after Bass, because it's like, right, there is a bounty on your head, dead or alive. And so they start doing a little bit of a Russian roulette of like, okay, one bullet in the chamber, spin it. Okay, everyone go around, pull the trigger, you know. And because they were getting into a scrap, I even love Bass taking a few hits, because I thought he was just going to take it straight up. It was just like, right, not going to fight back. It's like, this is what I feel, this is what I deserve. But then he's like, where were you when I was actually looking for a scrap? I guess for him, it's like, I'm not looking one for now. Like, I was ready for a fight just to get beat up, and now catching a few punches, like 3 or 4 punches, I'm like, nah. Yeah, I'm not looking for that fight anymore. You want this fight? I'm going to bring the heat. So start fighting back, but they gang up on him. Luckily, Billy was there, you know. Good thing he heard the scrap going down, because that third guy probably would have pulled the trigger. I mean, at that point, well, they kept rotating the chamber, so it resets the odds every time. But it's still, regardless of it, it's always a 1 in 6 chance. I was about to say, like, if they just moved over to the next part of the silk, but it's like, yeah, every time they would spin it again, so it got spun 3 times, so just as I guess your chances was just as likely of, you know, 1 in 6 to catch that bullet. But luckily Billy showed up and shot home dude in the face. And I love Pastor being like, now that's how you aim, Billy Crow. It's kind of a little weird, but it's also, to be fair, Bass is drunk. Hell, even to the point later on when he was trying to get on his horse, he couldn't do it the first time because he was still drunk. But they hunted everyone down. I wonder if that got, because later on Billy caught 2 people leaving a store. He noticed that the door handle was broken off, and these 2 women left. But he was like, come on, fellas, don't do that. They were trying to get away. Felt very like, I don't know, classic. That felt like a classic robber move or something. I'm like, oh yeah, we're just 2 women leaving the store or whatever. I don't know if one of them's the guy that got away from Billy. I'm assuming he is. Because the guy that Billy went into that fist fight with, but he also caught the other guy. Bass killed one of the people, the big dude, and arrested the woman. The character's name is Dora. The big dude's name is, I think, Moose from the subtitles. But either way, arrested them. Obviously, Billy walks away from this situation happy because, well, he got to spend more time with Callista. We learned a little bit more about her and the circumstances she went through, of just like the piece of land that her and her father owned, and them raising cattle, but then some other people coming into their territory that ended with like a fight. Her dad caught some lead and died. But it's like, yeah, but even if he was still alive, they would have hung him regardless. So she got put into this I guess it was almost like the equivalency of like for like 18 months she was kind of locked up in like what is essentially like kind of like a juvie of sorts, and now she's here, so back home. And Billy spending some quality time with her, and obviously wants to marry. It's like, yeah, but you don't have the money it would take to buy the ring. Now there's layers to that. I'm assuming it's I'm kind of working off my debt here by being here, and like it's twofold. Either it's like kind of like a debt thing of like, right, you're going to work off every bit of money you make pays off, your living wages, and you're paying off a debt of just your living wages and stuff, or you're just living here and stuff. Or is that supposed to imply like you're going to need a lot of money to buy a ring that would be enough to not only pull me away from this job, but also let you pull me away from this job? It has to be worthwhile enough that you got enough to flaunt it to kind of take me away, just so I feel comfortable leaving this behind, but also that my job is like, okay, you've paid enough to compensate for us losing a worker. So I feel like I'm leaning more towards the latter more than the former of like what I think that could be. We have Arthur deciding to leave because he can't stick around, and Sally's like, what, those kids, they're not going to do anything. But Arthur's coming from and it's what I brought up last episode, that it is that thing. I don't even want to even say privilege. It is this situation where you've led a certain life and you've only known the world one way. And that was because Sally was super young when the world was the way it was before. Once again, it's been 12 years. So she was extra young at the time, just when Jenny and when Jenny, her mom, got freed. Like, well, so many slaves got freed. And so she didn't see the ugliness in the world, which, Bass sees that on a regular basis. Jenny distinctly remembers, and so does Bass. Like, there's a lot of people old enough, and the older generation who remembers what they went through. And I guess Arthur, who's kind of been on his own, has kind of seen the ugliness of the world a lot more than maybe Sally has, because her family's kind of protected. I mean, it's like they've had their own plot of land for so long, so you've kind of been away from like the ugliness of the world. And so for her, it's like, oh, they're just kids who ain't going to do anything. But for him, it's like, yeah, but that's easy to say because you have the Reeves last name. Them starting shit with you would be starting shit with a U.S. Marshal. I don't think they know that, but I think that's going to be an irrelevant point. Because the point, I think I referenced it last episode, there is something in the trailer that I believe is tied to this. We'll talk about when the scene actually comes up, but it might be, I'd assume it to come up at least next episode. I was kind of halfway expecting it to pop up this episode, but Sally does see one of the kids in the distance, like, oh, you're trying to scare me. And it's like, you should be kind of scared. I mean, Arthur's scared, because she's like, I didn't take you for a coward. He's like, and I didn't take you for a fool. It's like, I want to run away with you. We could go to Paris, but for her, it's like, I'm Reeves. We don't run away. And that's the sad thing too, is like, Sally's not telling her family what storm might be coming their direction because of that. And Arthur's trying to bail. And I'm sure like that's got to hurt. You're young. This is your first love, and him kind of leaving because he's scared in this regard. But it's like, I understand where he's coming from. It is that self-preservation situation of like, saw how that scrap ended last time. That was just a scrap between kids. Get other people involved, that can turn into a nasty, nasty situation. Hell, even if you don't get other people involved, it could still turn into a nasty, nasty situation. So that is a storyline that is brewing in the, not necessarily in the background, but in the forefront as well. But it's simmering, and it's going to definitely heat up and start burning soon enough, that storyline. So we'll see where that ends up taking us. But obviously we have Bass coming back and coming back to find Edwin there. And it's got to rub you the wrong way when Edwin's sitting in your seat, because it's like, you're the head of the family, so this is my chair in particular. Like, last thing I want to do is come home and find another man in my chair type of situation. And it ends up being this amazing debate back and forth between Edwin and Bass about everything. And it's a situation where it's like, you can see both sides of it. I can see where Bass is coming. I can also see where Edwin's coming from. The whole conversation of, we need to build something for ourselves, because yes, slavery might have been like legally ended, but that doesn't change the fact is that there's still some F shit still going on, which Bass knows first and foremost because, Jenny was saying like, well, yeah, Bass has seen some terrible stuff, firsthand, because Edwin's saying like him and Esme have seen some bad stuff firsthand, traveling all around. But at the end of the day, he also heard that story from Jackson and what set him on his path. So I'm sure Edwin's point of, yeah, slavery is legally outlaw, but it's at best all, and I love the phrasing. It's not love is the wrong word, but it was just put so poetically. Slavery was wounded. It hasn't been put down. It's been wounded. So that the ugliness is still out there. And so it's like let's kind of work together. We can build a place for all of us in the Indian Territory, but it's like, why do that? You think like, because even Bass is like, do you not think they've suffered? Because it is that complicated thing of like, you would kind of be doing, because Edwin's coming at it from a different perspective. We would kind of buy land off of them rather than stealing it, but it's still like, hey, you're asking people to leave their land that's rightfully theirs. This is their territory when they've already had you've had white folk come in and take you and do what they've done to black folk. Like, you've seen what they've done to the indigenous people as well. So like, it doesn't come into that conversation, but it can be a conversation had of who are we to come and take someone else's stuff. Of like, yeah, you're paying for it, but it's still it can be a complicated thing of like, I can still see both sides of that situation of, here you are taking our territory when we've already had so much taken from us, but you're also in the same boat of so much was taken from you as black folks. So it's like, there's no easy solution. Like everyone's fucked in this situation. There is no like, once again, it's just everyone trying their best to survive, trying to do what's best for their people. But it's about like, hey, let's protect, like for Edwin, it's about like, hey, let's protect everyone. I mean, let's protect, our people. Look out for us, like all that we've been through. But it's like, yeah, the indigenous people have just been, you don't think they've suffered. And Bass is like, my job isn't just to protect black folk. My job is to protect everyone, black, red, or white. Like, that's my job as a lawman. And it's like, okay, I appreciate that and I admire that, but... And then Edwin definitely kind of lost his standing a little bit, and he kind of went a little too far, I think, when he was like, okay, but who's the master pulling your strings? Like, oh, I heard it was William Reeves that taught you how to shoot. The fact of the matter is, you were on the Confederate side where Reeves forced you to kill the people that were trying to set you free. And it's like, kind of throwing that in Bass's face, because, because I think it's also like, pride got in the way. It's ego and pride a little bit. It's like, hey, you are coming from a good place, but you're also human. You're going to let your ego and pride, because Bass was pointing out like, oh, you're married. How your wife and children feel about it? It's like, well, my wife and children know about the sacrifices having to be made. Here you are, and Bass also take offense with, hey, here you are talking about, have you ever had the whip? And it's like, so you want to talk about experiences like we've both walked in the same boots. And he's like, no, I've never gone through that. But that doesn't mean like I don't have to have just gone through that to be able to denounce that, which is 100% true. But it's like, right, just work with me, Bass. Together, we can change so much. And for Jenny, that's when it finally strikes. It's like, oh, so that's why you were so adamant about meeting my husband. That's why you and Esme are here, huh? Because you want my husband to be part of your pony show. You want to be able to say like Lawman Bass Reeves. You want to add a little more legitimacy to it by having Bass Reeves, because he had made this point of what was it like? He was saying the town, 15 or 20, I think he was saying like 15% of it is black. Have you seen any other lawmen? He's met another black lawman, but I don't remember. I'd assume he's in this area too. There's not too many people in Bass's position as a U.S. Marshal. And it's like, that's why we want to make a place that's safe for us and us alone, like place where we can own what we own and never have it taken away by someone else. Which is actually kind of interesting, considering, like, once again, there was something like that. It was Black Wall Street in Tulsa. Obviously, that's going to be like later on timeline wise. Not too far in the distance in the future, time frame wise, of this show, but obviously still quite a bit into the future. I've talked about it before, like the Tulsa Massacre. I think a lot of people learned a lot because of that, the Watchmen TV show. Like, I'd never heard of Black Wall Street or the Tulsa Massacre if it wasn't for that show. Never learned that in school, at least not in my recollection. Granted, it's been over a decade, well over a decade, Jesus, since I was in high school. But either way, My point is, like, even when you build something like that, it can sadly be taken away from you. History, we have hindsight to kind of think about that and talk about that. I mean, there were years of that happening, even post, obviously, Tulsa anyway. But still, it's just that thing of, even when you try to build something of your own, thinking like you'll have this land, states, countries of your own, doesn't change anything, because it could just as easily be sadly burned to the ground. So that is kind of actually like very disheartening when you actually really think about that from a historical standpoint of like where you are in time. You're so hopeful for the future. I mean, that's always that thing of like one generation to the next is always hopeful for the next thing, but it's like you have foresight and hope to believe that things are going to work out, but you never know, like, the folly of man and just the cruelty and disgustingness of humanity, of like what that terrible side of humanity can do when they really, like, the atrocities humanity's capable of. But yeah, getting back to the point, Jenny's not too happy of like, this isn't, you only want Bass because you want to use him as a figurehead. That's all this is, because having him on your pamphlet's going to make a lot more people sign up and choose this. So it's like, right, let's go. So Edwin and Esme leave, knowing that, yeah, I think Edwin kind of stepped in it in this regard. He's also kind of picked the wrong day. If he approached Bass on a completely different day, it's like, you never, Bass went through it was a rough day, as Bass kind of puts him. He ends up apologizing to Sally, and even her being like, are you and Mom okay? He's like, no, we're okay. And it's like, that was before they had their argument, which we'll get to in a second. But he even admits to her, it's like, yeah, I just had a bad day. Sorry I wasn't there for the carnival, but he's also like, I'm sorry I missed so much. That was something he really registered last episode when he left, where it's like, yeah, when he came back and then his kids weren't too excited to see him, the only ones that were Sally, because it's like, to you've missed so much over the years, over that 2-year period. You missed so much because you were going a lot, doing your thing as a marshal. And I think Sally's old enough to have enough memories with you, because she had like 10 straight years of, yeah, you were working on the farm, but you were always like home. So she has a little bit of a different experience compared to her siblings. Like, she's got a lot more time with you than her siblings have probably gotten from you in the past 2 years. But also, it's just like, right, you're lucky you're your mother's daughter. It's like, funny, she said that I'm my daddy's girl. And when Baz comes in the room and he takes off his shirt, Jenny sees the bruises he got from Webb's people kicking the shit out of him. But for him, it's just like, right, she's claiming he's the one that's changed because the way he's acting, and he's like, what about you? You're the one that's changed. And it's just both of you are hurt, because it's like, he's like, I'm sorry, I should have told you that I was leaving. She's like, I'm not angry that you're left. It's just that the more you're going, the less and less of my husband I see when you come back. And for Bass, I think just because he's in his feelings, understandably, it's just like, you don't know what I've gone through, you don't know what I've experienced, but it's also because you probably don't talk to Jenny about it. You keep a lot of that to yourself, which definitely ain't helping, but it's also like, you don't want to burden your wife to it. Once again, it's that conversation again about blood-soaked hands. It's like, how can I hold you and caress you and tell you all this stuff? That'd be making me pour some of that blood in your hands, making you carry it alongside me, and that's not something he wants to do. That's too much. They didn't ask to carry that burden. It was your burden. You took that pledge and decided to carry that burden. So, but he ends up going to collect the money for all the guys he's brought in, and he hears about Jackson. Yeah, Jackson, he's like, no, you're 50 short. And she's like, no, you only gave boots. It's like, no, I handed over an alive prisoner, Jackson, to the ranger. And it's like, well, that's not what they reported. So for him, it's like, they killed him. And in that moment, it's like, did something happen? Because Bass didn't immediately connect it to, but I was like, Pierce is... because they made this whole point about black folk disappearing. So he goes to see Ramsey. It's like, who is Mr. Sundown? And Ramsey doesn't really give him an answer until Ramsey hangs. Before he hangs, he's like, yo, he references the peso, and Bass remembers that's what Pierce's badge is made from. So it's like Pierce's, which I was like, oh, so I guess I was right, because I felt like they were, not unless there's a twist where he's not, but which is so interesting. considering like the way he acted towards Bass, to be fair, it's like Bass has a badge, so it's a little different. But it's like if you're making, maybe it's not just black folk he's making disappear, but maybe it's a lot, like maybe he's making other people disappear too. But maybe it's just, maybe making black folk is a side hustle of his. He's like, oh, I got this badge, but I'm also doing all this shady shit on the side because I'm getting paid to do it because he's secretly a monster. Not even secretly, but just straight up a monster. That's where I was bringing up before. I meant to circle back to it earlier, but I forgot. Was the wolf? I'm like, did you use the wolf to tear Jackson? Because you were bringing this whole point of no one deserved to die like that, but then you make Jackson potentially die like that. That's like, it adds to the validity that he's a monster too. Once again, unless it's not him, but why would Jackson's boots be what made it there, even though he was alive and well, and making it seem like Bass? Because it made it seem like Bass delivered the boots. It's not like, oh, something happened and we delivered the boots along the way. It's like, no. And intentionally making it seem like Bass delivered the boots. And then I'm like, did he not think word would get to Bass, or did he just not give a shit? Either way, Bass is now dealing with that thought that it's like Pierce might be Mr. Sundown. Just that whole ending sequence of, that like it's that conversation I keep bringing up about carrying the blood and how it's never been something he's had to worry about carrying. But it's just like, right, Bass is like, you have no right to judge me. God will be the one to judge me. He's like, then you also don't get the right to judge me, Bass. At the end of it, he's like, heaven is filled with killers. If I'm allowed to do what I'm doing, who's to say I'm not God's instrument down here doing his work? Heaven's filled with killers. And when it's all said and done, I'll be welcoming just like you. Once again, trying to say you and me are exactly the same, Bass. He always said, like, a wolf recognizes another wolf. Only difference is you carry a burden with being a wolf where I don't. I've never felt bad about being the wolf that I am. So, once again, that's just, I don't think that's a conversation they have. Like I said, not unless it's cut out of the episode, but it could just be a manifestation of Bass's own guilt and just maybe still a little hungover from the whole experience. Probably not. Not even just hungover just from being drunk, but just the experience itself and the guilt and just all that he's feeling, that the emotional hangover that's kind of warping his mind and manifesting that, So, did kind of say that death was kind of coming his way, like 2 episodes ago, the house that they were staying at. Not 2 episodes ago, last episode. That I think the whole point was like death is coming his way, so he came across Pierce and Pearson doing what he did to Jackson. So where that goes, where that takes us, we'll ultimately have to wait to see. There should only be 2 episodes left in the season. I haven't heard anything, so we might find out more. Maybe there's something out there. I haven't heard anything yet, but it still seems like this might be a mini-series, but there's always a possibility they might change their mind and extend this. We'll see. I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.